So hello, everyone, and welcome to our first Tech Talks. We're really excited. I think we're just going to give us a couple, maybe one more minute to give other people a chance to join us, give them a chance for them to log on, since we are going to be walking you through this very high level assessment. So I think we'll just wait just another moment and then we'll officially get started. All right. Okay. I think we're ready. Kyle, we're good to go?
Yep, good to go.
Okay, great. All right, again, welcome to our first Tech Talks workshop, how to assess the true cyber risk of your remote worker environment. We are so excited that you're here because we are a little bit nerdy and we get really excited about these kinds of things. So just to give you an idea of what Tech Talks is about, it's really for our customers, our prospects, our friends, our colleagues. It's about information sharing. They're not sales presentations. And so you're going to get a lot of really wonderful, actionable information that you can use today to help to better secure your remote environment. And so welcome. We know that you have a lot of choices. We know that you're very busy. And so we're so grateful that you've decided to spend the next hour with your friends at Vox. My name, and this is just the quick agenda. We're going to do the introductions. I'm going to introduce your teachers for today in just a moment. We're going to go over what some of the biggest mistakes are when we're doing an assessment so we can avoid those. We're going to talk about the NIST cybersecurity framework, which is what the assessment is based on. We're going to actually walk you through the assessment, and then we're going to help you build a security roadmap. So when I say you're getting actionable information, that's exactly what you're going to leave here with today. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. We want this to be as interactive as possible. Please know that there is a 15-second delay. So it might take us a moment to get to your question, but I promise you we're going to do the best we can to answer all of your questions. So, all right. So my name is Krista Arthur, and I'm part of the Vox security practice, and I'll be hosting the webinar today. I'm with Eric Reynolds. He did not bring his fish with him today, but I'm with Eric Reynolds. He is the director of solution architecture and design and engineering at Vox, and he's helped to build the security program here at Vox. So we're very excited to have Eric, and James Rothman, who is our virtual chief information security officer with deep knowledge, lots of experience in assessments and security. So we're very happy to have him. So just real quick, we know that you're friends of Vox, but just a nice reminder that, you know, we're here to inspire others and to help people prosper. You know, technology runs the business, but it's people that run the technology. So everything that we do at Vox is to help your business grow through supporting your people, your processes, and your technology. In case you didn't know, Vox does have a whole security practice. It's a holistic practice. A holistic approach to risk mitigation. We help with insight, which is a lot of what we're doing today. You know, you can't take inspired action without insight. So we help with insight, governance, and planning. So the security and technology road mapping, of course, with the technology, and even help with managed services. We know that, you know, those of you that are working in the IT world, you have a lot on your plate. And so if you need a little bit of extra help, we can help you with that too. So what are some of the biggest mistakes that organizations make? Well, one is underestimating the threat. One of the things that we hear a lot is, how relevant is this to me? Maybe there's someone that they know of that's had an attack, but they're really underestimating the risk to their organization. So that's one of the mistakes that we see a lot of business leaders make. No leadership buy-in. So right now what we're seeing is a lot of the security decision making is on the plates of the director of IT and everybody that's really concerned about the uptime of the organization. And so you know what you need to help to secure the organization, but oftentimes it's hard to get the buy-in from leadership to support you. So one of the things that you're going to leave here with today is with the assessment, you will be able to, if you need help with that, you'll be able to take that to leadership and say, look, these were some of the areas that we have gaps. These are significant risks for us, and this is something I'd like to address. No strategic planning and ad hoc security solutions. So with ad hoc security solutions, what I mean is that maybe you need a firewall. We might need a SIM. We might need some other, maybe we need endpoint security. But without a strategic plan, you're just buying different technologies. And what the studies have shown and what we've seen actually working with organizations is that, number one, it's expensive. It will blow your budget. Two, not how do you then coordinate all the different technologies? So then it's actually harder for you to protect the organization. And then we've seen that organizations that have disparate technology actually don't have a better security posture. So these are some of the mistakes that just by being here today, you're avoiding. So the assessment that we're going to walk you through is not the full NIST assessment. Those are probably how many questions, James, on the...
There's over, in addition to 100, I think there's 108 questions in total.
Yeah, it's pretty extensive. So we've pared it down to about 60 questions just on the remote worker environment. So this isn't meant to assess the entire organization. This is just looking at your remote worker environment, or now maybe you're bringing some of your employees home, the hybrid environment. NIST stands for the National Institutes of Standard and Technology, and the CSF is the cybersecurity framework. And for us, it's the gold standard and the basic assessment. There's different kinds of assessments for different regulatory bodies, but this is really a nice gold standard. It's going to give you a good overview of where some of your gaps may lie. The NIST CSF has 5 controls that we are going to look at: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So I'm going to stop here and I'm going to share my screen so I can show you what that looks like. And hopefully you can see this. Oh, I forgot to mention, in the handouts section, Kyle, how do they open up that section? Can they see it?
Yep. So in the top right corner of your screen, there's an icon that says handouts with a little green dot next to it. If you click on handouts, there's going to be 2 Excel documents in there that you can download and fill out and follow along with as Chris is going through it.
Thank you. So first is the remote worker security assessment. So this is for you. If you want to go ahead and download it, I'll give you a minute to do that. And then the second document we'll be working with is the cybersecurity risk plan. And this is where we're going to show you how you will take this information to help to build your roadmap. So if you want to download that, because you are doing a self-assessment. All right. So James, I'm actually going to give this over to you to explain the maturity model, and the controls and everything.
No problem. Actually, Krista, can you just blow up the screen just a little bit? The text is really small.
Yeah, I'm going to have
to
have Kyle is our engineer for today.
Oh, okay. If you can go to like 120% perhaps, because the text is pretty small. So let me I'll talk about the NIST cybersecurity implementation tiers. So what it is it's a scaled ranking system from 1 to 4. It describes the degree of which an organization exhibits characteristics described in the NIST cybersecurity framework. So organizations using the tiers receive context on their cyber risk, and this mechanism enables organizations to understand the characteristics of their approach to managing this cybersecurity risk, which helps them prioritize and achieve their cybersecurity goals. So basically, like I said, it goes from 1 to 4. Tier 1 represents an organization with either nothing or just an informal reactionary approach to cybersecurity risk management, while a score of 4 represents an agile, a risk-informed organization with basically the highest degree of sophistication in their cybersecurity risk management plan. Now, most companies by far don't have a 4. I mean, a 4 generally would be like the Department of Defense or the Pentagon or something along those lines. They're within the screen, what you see on the screen right now, there's the descriptions of them: partial, risk-informed, repeatable, adaptive. But basically, just think of it as scale of 1 to 4, 1 being the lowest. You've got nothing in place or minimal in place, to 4 meaning an absolutely advanced and secure processes and profile.
Thank you. So one thing you should know is that when you're doing an assessment, it's not a pass or fail, okay? It's really about evolving your program and assessing your own risk. So as James already mentioned, if you are working for the government, you have very strict regulations that you need to adhere to, and so certain areas are going to be a high risk area that then needs to be managed and mitigated. But maybe your level of risk isn't as high. So this will help you to determine what you really need to invest in. Again, it's not pass or fail. Nobody's going to look at this. This is for you. This is your self-assessment. And it's for you to get a better look at your remote work environment. So what we're going to do now is we're going to walk you through each question. We're going to tell you why they're important. And then you're going to give yourself a score, 1 to 4, based on your perceived level of maturity. Then what will happen is you'll get a score for each control. So identify, protect, do you know where everything is? How well is it being protected? How able are you to detect if there is an issue? How fast can you respond? How well prepared are you to recover? So you're going to get a score here, and that's also going to inform you of what your level of maturity is with regards to these controls. I hope that makes sense. Does that make sense, do you think? Yes. Everybody's saying yes. I can feel the yes. I can feel it coming through. All right. So I'm going to leave it to our teachers today to kind of guide you through the rest of the assessment.
Awesome. Thanks, Krista. So for line number 12, 13, and 14, which is under identify asset management, basically these 3 questions are pertaining to, do you know, or do you have a database of all your physical assets and all your software assets? Because basically, how do you secure your environment if you don't know what to secure? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. So do you have a database, or, I mean, it could be an Excel sheet, whatever the case may be. So basically an inventory of all software, all hardware, and do you have a prioritization to say this hardware is more critical than this hardware, or this software is more critical than this software? Because again, you need to have an understanding of how they're classified. Is this classified material? Is it public material? That sort of thing. So again, these 3 questions all pertain to that. Okay. So again, as Krista said, if you can give yourself scores from 1 to 4 of where you believe you fall in these particular categories. For line 15, if a criminal gains physical access to an unlocked machine, is it difficult to steal private or sensitive information? So this basically comes down to, is PII, or personally identifiable information, is that stored on their machine? Is it in the cloud? Is it locked up somewhere? So basically, someone grabs a laptop, someone has access to it. Is there data, confidential data or PII data that this thief might have access to? So again, something to think about. Are people trained such that they need to save their information to the cloud or to some password protected folder, that sort of thing? That's what that question is pertaining to. As far as data handling on line 16, so basically, does your staff understand how to handle data? Meaning, if it's confidential data, do they know what they need to do with it? Do they know how to secure it? Do they know, first of all, should they have access to it? So this is basically all of the rules, regulations, or policies and standards as far as what should they be doing with their data and how should they handle their data. That's what that question pertains to. Eric, if you want to continue.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks, James. Lines 17, 18, and 19 really pertain a lot to kind of your overall Windows management policies and how your organization manages those Windows policies or your PC policies. Is your company utilizing employee-owned laptops, or are they using their own personal computers while working from home? And if so, do we have specific policies and credentials in order to manage either those applications or laptops? And also within those policies, we want to make sure that we are, again, utilizing the best cases of security and making sure that those devices are automatically locked so that we don't have children, spouses, somebody that might be able to come in and look at some of that PII data that might be up and on the screen. So when they are away, we want to make sure that those are, in fact, able to be locked. And then with that 19, we want to make sure with that lock, we want to make sure that, again, that there is a timer mechanism in order to make sure that that lock is engaged.
Great. For line number 20, as far as background checks, basically what this is referring to is whenever you're hiring new people or when you have people who are going to have access to your data, is there any kind of background checks that are run on these people? This can even apply to consulting firms, for example. Not necessarily that you need to run a background check, but you need to know that it's actually been done on them so that there's some kind of a contract in place that you have this information. For line 21, it says here administrators to have 2 accounts. So again, I want to make it clear, very often you have people in the organization who are administrators. They could be the IT director and the CIO or even some of the engineers, that sort of thing. The idea here is that these people, when they're doing their day-to-day jobs, should not be logging into your environment with administrative privileges. They should be logging in as a quote-unquote regular user. And the reason for this, of course, is if ever their account got hacked, you don't want it to be an administrative account that gets hacked. So the idea is that they log in with the administrative password only to do certain administrative functions, but their day-to-day should be just with a regular user password. Okay.
I just want to interject here. There's an area for you to make comments. So if you don't know, give yourself a 1, and then maybe in the comments section, there may be somebody else that you can ask. So I just wanted to say that.
Okay.
All right.
So yeah, no problem. So what I'm mentioning now pertains to line 21 and 22. 21 is basically, do they have 2 accounts? Line 22 is sort of the reasoning as to why they should have this, that they need to use these accounts without administrative privileges for the, and I like to use the word sort of typical or typical user type functions. Okay. For number 23, each company should have something called an AUP, which is an acceptable use policy. This is the stuff basically saying you can't use the work laptop for personal use. You can't surf pornography. You can't do illicit things. You can't, things along those lines. Again, legally, this is something that's a requirement such that if ever someone does something they shouldn't do, you can say to them, you signed this policy, you're not allowed to do this. Otherwise, they can say, oh, I didn't know that. Okay, so it's something that you really need to have in place. Okay, on line 24, it pertains to password managers. Ideally, you want employees and or the company to have some sort of a password management solution. And the reason for this is very often, I mean, I've seen this throughout many, many companies that I've worked for. People, you tell them that they need to have, let's say, a 15-character password. They say it's too long, and they write it on a Post-it note, and they put it on their monitor, things along those lines. And I've seen this time and time again. So the idea here is that people who have difficulty remembering all these passwords and these complex passwords, there's a method by which they can use, let's say, one password, and it'll apply to all different solutions. So it's all within some sort of a password management solution.
Great.
Okay.
So let's just take a quick break, just a pause, in case someone has any questions about the first control, which is identify. Remember, this is just about your remote workers, your remote worker environment. And with regards to while people are maybe typing up their questions, if they have any, there was a situation, I think, in London where teacher left their password on the laptop and a kid was able to get in and change everybody's grades. So to your point about leaving the passwords on Post-it notes. So it's better than when I was a kid. I'd turn that D into a B on my report card and try to figure out.
We all did it. We all did it.
Now we can just hack right into the system. All right. Does anyone have any questions about the first control? All right. Let's keep going.
All right. So on line 25, this has to do with something called an MSB. Now, an MSB is a minimum security baseline. And what that is for each type of technology that you have in your organization, you should have this device or this technology configured such that, like, if you take a server as an example, all the unnecessary ports should be locked down. Certain services should be locked down. So there are things that you should do to each of your technologies to ensure that it meets a minimum level of security, such that also when you roll out a multitude of these devices or this technology, you can just use this standard base image that you've created that is rock solid and secure. And that's kind of the reasoning for having an MSB for the different types of technologies. Okay. For line 26, this has to do with a security awareness training program. This one is pretty self-evident nowadays. Are you performing training, be it computer-based training, posters, signs, classes, whatever the case may be? Ideally, you want to have this. You want to have phishing simulations, because right now phishing is by far the easiest way for companies to get breached. So again, phishing simulations trains people such that when they click on something they shouldn't have clicked on, there's a warning or a message or some sort of a training that would appear that if they do something bad. So that's kind of the idea there.
Perfect. On line 27, as this kind of moves more now into the internal IT security portion, it's important to start looking at your certificates and how you are authenticating either to website or to your servers or to your into your applications. And it's important to really start looking at an internal or an external certificate authority. Okay. Line 28, when you have your remote employees, we want to make sure that all of those connections that they are using to come back into the corporation are encrypted. And what is the level of encryption that you are using, right? We want to make sure that we are always using the strongest encryption available, either based upon whatever type of protocol you're using or VPN, something of that effect. What is your ability to overall lock down applications installed on your company's computers? We want to make sure that, or you want to make sure that your employees are not allowed or have the ability to download, torrents or peer-to-peer networking applications, and only the applications needed to run the business. Right. Number 30, we want to look at encrypting that data while it is at rest. So for any type of application that your any type of application that is acquiring any type of data and is being stored either internally to the local hard drive, such as PII information, or in a server in a database, we always want to make sure that we are doing some type of at-rest encryption. And same with transit. We want to make sure, again, that data is encrypted as it's being communicated either between the employee or the application. So it's very important that we are encrypting all of that type of information, because we never know who's listening. For our mobile device management, it's important to start thinking about those types of applications in order to maintain a policy to your remote devices, whether that be Android, iOS, tablets, what have you. It is imperative that we start building a policy that requires them to, if they're going to access company email, that it has a minimum of 4-digit password in order to access that particular application on the BYOD or a company supplied tablet. Okay, it's also they have the ability, if that tablet or if that iOS Android device is lost, there is that ability to either retrieve the information or remotely erase it. So very important to start thinking about and have mobile device management when you're thinking about pushing applications, business applications out to BYOD devices or company issued devices.
Real quick, Eric, we have a question back about
Yes.
control. So they're asking for an example of when you could control, or sorry, when you could grade a control at tier 4, or if it's better to grade it at a max tier 3.
So let me jump in for that. Tier 4 is truly, I mean, it's hard for me to describe. I mean, you're truly, from A to Z on top of it, it is 100% complete. Yeah. Generally, if you're something
You're
that's
the NSA.
Yeah, if you're something, let's say you're very strong. I mean, I don't usually recommend a 4 only because that's the pinnacle, but you can put a 3 or a 3.5. When you grade these out, what happens is you're going to have a bunch of 3s and 2s and 1s and so on. And in the end, you're going to get a score of, 1.73, let's say. Okay, so it's okay to put partials as well. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and I can kind of see how how that could be a valid question, specifically to some of them that we've kind of discussed here, right? Just the certificate authority. There might be somebody who's here on the call today that is using an external third-party certificate authority through GoDaddy or something of that effect, and so they are maximizing the ability to support the certificates for their applications and servers.
But Eric, also, if for example, if you're going to grade yourself a 4, it would imply that you, of course, have that, and also this vendor is managed, it's maintained. There's checkups on it. There's SLAs. I mean, so that's why a 4 is like this all-encompassing.
Excellent, great point.
And you have to remember too that it's not a one and done when you do these assessments. Your security program is always going to be evolving. Based on, new threats that are coming, new regulations that you may have. So, also giving yourself a 3 gives you a little bit of room to grow. So anyway, just wanted to throw that in there. I think we are on VPN, number 36.
Okay, I think we're actually on 33. Yep. Yeah. 33, yeah. So again, with the mobile device management, another key, or is that key application for managing some of those remote devices, is that you have the ability to always maintain that level of security patch, so that, again, any data that is being transmitted is always going to be secure within that Android, iOS device, or even Windows device. Okay. Number 34. Mutual authentication. Mutual authentication is a type of authentication that allows the application and a server, a device, another application to be able to exchange a criteria or an authentication method where they will actually communicate back and forth to understand that, yes, they both have the ability to authenticate before they send source and destination information, before they continue with the additional authentications. So it's just another way to look at an application to server type of authentication to gain just that much higher security method. Let's see here. Number 35. When you're using session border controllers, you want to make sure that we're always looking at encryption, right? So using TLS, SRTP, SRTCP in order to encapsulate or to encrypt any of that SIP traffic. 36. There's always a need for to have, it's important for your employees to be able to connect securely, either via the Wi-Fi network, back through the VPN, back to the corporation. 37, how is your VPN concentrator patched? Is it patched on a regularly scheduled basis? And is it continually managed and monitored? All right. Let's see here, 38. Sorry here. There we go. So multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication is a valuable way to secure your VPN traffic or any other traffic for that matter. As it authenticates, it allows for your employee to add that secondary method of authentication to ensure that that employee is authorized to either access that particular application or access the overall network.
For number 39, this one really pertains to, are you doing any sort of monitoring to see if there's anomalies that are being caused, hidden malware, and so on and so forth? So very often companies will say, yes, we've got certain tools in place, but no one's actually taking a look. No one's monitoring it. No one's actually verifying it. So this question pertains to that. And question number 40 has to do with anti-malware. Again, what used to be called antivirus. Does each and every device have some sort of an anti-malware solution on it? Okay. Again, you would think that the answer is yes, but I've seen very often it's the case where, either it's people forgot to put it on or whatever. And again, this could be part of the MSB that I mentioned earlier on. For example, a desktop system or a laptop system, where as part of the minimum security baseline, you could have antivirus installed on that particular system.
Also, if you have someone at home and they're using their own device, sometimes, they actually don't have that on there. So
sure.
That's also part of that. Mm-hmm.
Sure. And that's, of course, a complexity, because now we live in a world, especially now during COVID, where people are using their own devices very often rather than a work supplied device. So that makes it somewhat more complicated in that everyone needs to understand and realize that their device needs to have some sort of an endpoint protection mechanism. Okay. So that's, again, an added complexity.
Firewall?
Number 42. Yeah, firewall. Sorry about that. A hardware firewall is operated between the internal and external networks. So that is very important to always have a firewall to be able to filter that particular traffic coming inbound into the corporate network.
Okay. And for 43, basically what I'm talking about here is I'm talking about administrative IDs that have to be changed. Really all that means is you go out to the store, you buy a new firewall. Very often companies forget to change the base password, which could be admin and the word password is the actual password, that sort of thing. So very often people forget to change that. And when you actually do an assessment of your environment or a penetration test of your environment, you'll see that a whole bunch of devices still have that initial password when you first purchase a device.
And as we always look at continuing the update and managed services on our network firewalls, we always want to make sure that they are always up to date with the latest and greatest security patches and policies and ACLs.
Okay. For line number 46, as far as logging, so what you want to have is to ensure all of your servers, all of your devices, every single device really in the organization should have logging enabled, some sort of a logging mechanism enabled, such that when people log on, when people log off, when people delete data, and so on and so forth, this can be logged somewhere, and ideally, which we'll come to shortly, that some sort of a system is actually analyzing all these logs. Okay, so that's kind of the idea there. 47, again, has to do with, do you have some sort of a technology that's restricting website access for business supplied devices. So for example, very often what happens is you might have an employee who log into, or they try to log into one of these, I don't know, a gaming site or some sort of a site where very often, or a torrent site, where very often these types of sites have anti-malware, or excuse me, have malware, such that it's a very simple way to infect the device. So ideally, your organization has tools in place to limit access to these types of websites. Okay. 48 has to do with an intrusion detection system or intrusion prevention system, or IDS, IPS. So basically, this is typically a device, could be a piece of hardware, could be a piece of software. It basically, what it does is, if someone's trying to break in or to access your network, this thing will either, if it's an IPS, will stop the person, or an IDS, what it'll do is it won't stop the person, but it'll let you know that someone's actually trying to do this. So again, this gives you more visibility into your environment. Okay. Now, line 49 is a big one. This has to do with what's called a SOC or NOC. So Security Operations Center, Network Operations Center. So this is basically, do you have a team of people? Now, this could be either internal to your organization or some sort of a third party that's doing this for you. But basically, it's a team of people that are getting access to all those logs that I mentioned to you just before, that they're the ones looking at these logs and determining or trying to figure out if there's any actionable data. Is there something bad that's happening? So these organizations are typically 24/7. They're looking at all your logs, they're looking at all the data, and they're the ones that are analyzing the environment to verify that everything's operating as it should be. Okay? For in the response section, number 50, this has to do with an incident response plan. It's pretty self-explanatory. Do you have a written incident response plan? If something goes bad, and something always does go bad, you have, let's say, ransomware, do you have a, playbooks, let's say, or standard operating procedures of what to do when these things happen? And if you do have that, of course, you need to test it, right? So on a yearly basis, this should be tested. You should have tabletop exercises, for example. It's a very effective way of testing your incident response plan, okay? On 52, it has to do with lost devices, stolen devices. Very often an employee loses a device, and they wait until next Monday, let's say, to inform you. The problem is, if you didn't have encryption or things like that, there could have been a problem there, that someone might have had access to that data. So there needs to be some sort of a strategy, some sort of a communication strategy for them as far as what do they do, or instructions what they do if they've lost a device. And 53 has to do with an actual communication strategy. So if you do have, let's say, ransomware, in the example I just gave before, perhaps depending on your organization, personal information has been leaked, credit card information, social security information. Who do you call? Do you contact the police? Do you contact news agencies? Do you contact the government? Do you contact the who do you contact? What do you do? So you need to have some sort of a communication strategy to determine what you need to do. And finally, in that particular section, has to do with the incident response plan, where is there a team? Are there people that you know to call? Very often companies hire third parties, or maybe a company on retainer, for example, that if something goes bad, you know that you can call them and they're going to come on in and they're going to help you with whatever the issue might be. Okay. Finally, in the last section, the recover section, okay, this has to do primarily with if things go bad, and they will, do you know what to do? So the first question is, do you have the ability to investigate these things, remediate? Very often what I've seen is there's a situation with, let's say, let's use the same example of ransomware, and the company says, well, we cleaned it all up, everything's great. The truth of the matter is they don't know if it's really been cleaned. They don't know. There could be what's called an APT, which is an advanced persistent threat. There could be someone still sitting on their network observing, and 6 months later, they might do the same type of attack. So ideally, you want to have professionals who really know what they're doing to determine exactly what happened, what's the root cause analysis, clean the environment, all that, eradicate the threat, and so on and so forth. Okay. For 57, this has to do with full backups. So basically, again, we say full backups here, but really it comes down to anywhere that you might have information, data, is this data backed up? In particular, if it's confidential data, you want to ensure that your data is backed up no matter where it might reside. Because very often what you have are people save their files to, let's say, their local drive, you know, their Word documents, Excel documents, whatever it is. They save it to their local drive, but their local drive is not backed up. Only some shared drive somewhere is backed up. So again, this is one of those things that you have to either train people to save it to those shared drives, or maybe the most simplistic way that people do it is very often they map a drive on someone's computer. So they know that the Z drive, for example, is where you store all your data, even though they don't realize that it's necessarily in the cloud or on some server somewhere being backed up. Okay. 58 has to do with your backups. So it basically comes down to testing your backups. You want to ensure that they're working. Okay. Very often people make backups, but they don't restore. They really don't know if it's actually working. Okay. When you're backing up data, do you have enough capacity, for example, to hold the backups? Very often there's, you know, petabytes and petabytes of data, and they might have, you know, they don't have the capacity to store all that data. So there needs to be some sort of analysis of what kind of capacity is needed. For line 60, this has to do with something called RTO and RPO, okay? So what this pertains to, if something bad were to happen and you were to lose data or you were to lose systems, ideally you did some sort of a business impact assessment to determine what are the costs associated. For example, if a certain system takes a day to restore, a week to restore, a month to restore, what is the impact to your organization? You might have a particular system that if it's down for an hour, you're going to lose $1 million. So you got to make sure that that thing is high availability, backed up, clones, redundancy, and all that. You might have another system that if it's down for a month, there's no impact whatsoever, in which case, don't spend any money on the backup solution for that. So you have to understand where your risks are, what's the business impact, to determine what type of backup and restore capabilities that you need. And finally, the last one has to do with the replacement of compromised systems. So again, you have the same example that I said before. You have ransomware. It completely knocked out a system. You might need to keep that system for forensic purposes. The FBI might be called in. Police might be called in. They want to catch the bad guy. They might need access to that particular server. And if they need access to that server, you need to have some sort of a plan of what server can you put in its place? What can you build? Because you have a business to run. Whereas if that server is gone, there needs to be some sort of a contingency plan, for example. Okay. And that's all of them. Krista?
Whew, that's great. You guys did a great job going through all those points. So does anyone have any questions about their remote or hybrid work environment, about the assessment, or any questions about any of the questions here before we move on? Because this would be a good time, or if something comes up later, you can always contact us at a later time as well. All right, so now that you have been filling this in and kind of going along, you should have a score from 1 to 4 for each control. So identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. You should have a score there. That score, again, corresponds to the tier explanation: partial, risk-informed, repeatable, and adaptive. So that's really important for you to know for our next area we're going to be working on, which is the security risk plan. So that is in the handout section. Again, you can download that. We're not going to obviously map everything over, but basically this is a version of what we do for our customers when we do a full-blown NIST assessment. So you're going to look at your maturity level and look at the control and the maturity level, and it's really up to you to estimate your level of risk. So for example, identify asset management, our maturity level is at a 1, and that's high risk for our organization. These are just examples. You can put in a solution description. I put in life signs, solution notes, maybe what your budget is, and then you can decide whether or not you're going to start it in Q1. Obviously, we're time traveling back to Q1 for this, but basically on this sheet, you would put Q1, or maybe you wanted to put Q2, and delete that. And it's going to take 2 months. So then you just put Q2 here. And then what you'll get is a really nice map on when you're going to start, what your budget is, any notes that you need to make. And I'm going to tell you why this is important. Again, this is a version of what we do when we deliver something for a customer, and it's very helpful because we can estimate based on your level of risk, based on the level of maturity, and your budget, this is when you should begin to implement. You can do your vendor research, you can get your budget approval. The other thing that you can do, because it can be all color coded, is you can then take that to management if you need help with management buy-in, as an example. So another area might be protect. The control is protect. MFA. Sometimes I think we take it for granted that everyone has multi-factor authentication enabled, but they don't. And so that's a level 5 risk when you look at your organization, right? So you put your solution description in here. And again, this is a Q1. We think it's going to take about 3 months to implement fully. So this is how you would then build your plan and just put a high level budget in. So that's really the risk assessment. If you were going to just map over from your NIST assessment. All right. I'm going to stop sharing. Does anybody have any questions about that? All right. Our world here, our virtual world. So what are some next steps? If you have more questions about the workshop, about the assessment, even about filling out your risk action plan, your gap analysis, just let us know. We'll send you an email. We call it a coffee talk. If you want to have a coffee talk with us, there's no pressure, no obligation. Again, it's not a sales thing. We just are here to help inform you and help you to improve your cybersecurity posture for your remote worker environment. So that's our workshop. And man, we jammed through it. You guys are fast talkers.
Thank you, everyone, for attending today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for attending. And again, if you have any questions, just reach out. We're here to help.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.